Hello, and this is Helen Thomas from the CDFM study group. And we're going to wrap up the review for CDFM Module 1, Competency 4, which is Management Responsibility for Internal Control. So the internal control, the idea behind it is for management to assess internal risk, identify the risk areas, and put those measures in place to either mitigate those risks or to eliminate the risk. And so we talked about the various guidances associated with internal control. The Federal Managers Financial Integrity Act of 1982, that's the law that says each agency is required to have internal control. There's an OMB circular associated with internal control, and that is OMB Circular A123, MICP, Management Responsibility for Internal Control. The DOD instructions, 5010.40. Make sure you know it's .40 because I have seen instances where on the test they'll put 5010.20, 5010.30, 5010.40, and so forth. And so you need to know it's 5010.40 deals with internal control. Also, we've talked about the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, who is that external auditing agency that works directly for Congress. The GAO also has guidance on internal control, and that is listed in the GAO Standards for Internal Control of the Federal Government, and that is in the GAO Green Book. So remember that all the GAO guidance, they're listed as Green Book, Red Book, Yellow Book. So for internal control, it's green. For auditing, it's the yellow book. For appropriations, it's the red book. So how often are managers responsible for reporting their annual finding on internal control? Annually, yes. I actually gave the answer away. So annual findings must be reported each year by each agency and submitted according to the Federal Managers Financial Integrity Act of 1982. All right, so the basic GAO standards, that's the acronym CRIME. That's the acronym that we need to remember. Control environment, risk assessment, information and communication, monitoring, and existing control activity. Need to know the definition of each one of those so that you're not confused by control environment versus control activities. The activities are when you set up your SOPs, your policies, separation of duty. Those are the things that you do. Control environment is more of the environment that your managers, the positive environment that your managers put in place to ensure that everyone is cautious of what the processes are and that those processes are being followed. When it comes to risk assessment, no different than identifying the risk, mitigating your risk, information and communication, getting the word out to every individual so they know what the processes are and what the policies, the SOPs, standard operating procedures are. Monitoring is the essential step in that whole process because you can set these policies in place, but if no one is going behind and checking to ensure that people are following these policies, then you're kind of wasting your effort. So monitoring is one of the essential steps of this 5 basic standards. So make sure you know the definition. Now, we talked about each year that the agencies are required to submit their report. It's either going to be, they have to do, when we do with financial management, we have to report on general internal control deficiencies, and we also have to report on internal control of our financial records because we use various systems, but are we checking to ensure that the systems are producing the right data, the correct data, up to date? So general internal control looks at reportable condition. Are those conditions or deficiencies identified that's tracked internally? Material weakness are those outside of the agencies that must be reported and tracked outside. When it comes to your internal control deficiencies of your financial records, there are three terms: a control deficiency, reportable condition, and material. The definition is pretty much the same. So make sure that you understand those. The internally tracked versus external or outside. So the Department of Defense level weaknesses, and you kind of walk it from the bottom. The installation activity needs to report to its higher head of the installation. Major command needs to report to the command's higher. Component got to report to DOD. So these are very simple concept just to remember. So then what's in the annual report? How is it structured? So there are three statements of assurance. It's either an unqualified statement, which means no material weakness reported. A qualified statement of assurance, meaning there's at least one. Or a statement of no assurance, no processes in place to or pervasive material weakness. So the packet, that report that we say is submitted annually, the cover memorandum must have one of those three statements on it. Unqualified, meaning I have nothing that qualifies to be a material weakness. Qualified, meaning I have at least one, or a negative statement. The basis for this position should be documented. I do not have reasonable assurance that even if I do everything according to the policies, procedures established, that I will still have deficiencies. The second part of that report is a description of how the evaluation was conducted. Third part, a statement about uncorrected material weakness. And the fourth part is the statement on those material weakness identified, but we were able to fix them. And then we need to explain how we fix them. Because remember, material weakness are those things that affect more than just our organization. It could be going on in a different organization also. And so for the internal control, just make sure that you understand the terms: accessible units, control technique, the benefits, key internal controls. Just look over the charts at the end. And remember, if you study and review the material, you'll get a better understanding of it. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.